Hello everyone. Today uh, we're gonna study or learn a new concept for nested loop. We will talk today about nested loop, specifically nested for loop. Nested for loop. Okay. What is the nested for loop, or why we said nested for loop? Nested for loop uh, is we're gonna using a for loop within another for loop. So this term is related to this concept. If you want to draw the chart how this concept will be used, let's say we have a for loop here. This is the outer loop, for loop, and this is the header for this for loop. You start your code of statement for this loop by this square curly bracket, and the end square curly bracket for this for loop. Inside this for loop, you can write another for loop. This is the inner loop, and this is the outer loop. For inner loop, also it has header and body for this inner loop. Actually, this structure is called nested for loop. We have outer loop and we have inner loop. You can do multiple inner loop in your code. Okay, once the condition for this for loop return true, this body will be executed. How many times this body will be executed? According for the number of iteration inside this expression for the outer loop. Right? Let's take an example to briefly describe nested for loop. Let's say your example will be as follow. You need to write a program to print n, number n, followed by n factorial. We have a tabular format, and we have 5 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and each row or each number of row will be followed by calculated and factorial. We have 1 factorial, 2 factorial, 3 factorial, 4 factorial, and 5 factorial. Okay? This format is called tabular format. We have \t and we have \n. If you want to represent this format in C language, you should use the following tags: \n and \t. \t for spaces, tab, \n to create a new line. According to the value of n, your lines will be according the value of n. If n equal 10, you will see a number of rows from 1 to 10. If n equal 100, your number of rows will be from 1 to 100. So you need a loop to go through the number of rows from 1 to 5, let's say in our example. At each line or each row, according to the number of row, you need to calculate its factorial. Suppose we have n equal 1 or I equal 1, you need to calculate n factorial or I factorial. Okay. Now the challenge is how to calculate n factorial. Let's say you need to calculate 4 factorial. As we know, to calculate a factorial of n or 4 factorial is the multiplication of the number from 1 to this number, which is 4. 1 times 2 times 3 times 4. Another way you can calculate n factorial by reverse order. 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. You can solve n factorial by this order or by reverse order. Okay. As you can see, to solve n factorial, you need another loop. We need another loop. Why we need another loop? Because we have a repetition. The repetition here is multiplication. Multiplication is repeated. So at each iteration, you need to calculate the multiplication. Okay. Now let's go to Visual Studio to try coding this example. As I said before, we need a loop to go through lines of this table. If we have n equal 5, you need to go from 1 to 5. If n equal 10, you need to go from 1 to 10. So we need to use a loop. This example we will use for loop. We have an integer I, which is the counter for number of rows. Of course, we need to start by 1, not 0. Number of rows equal 1. I less than or equal, let's say 5. The step here is plus plus. Number of rows is incremented by 1. I plus plus. Okay, this block will be repeated 5 times. Before we go to this statement, we need to of the table, which is n. We need to go spaces. I will use \t or tab to print spaces. Then you will need to print n factorial. After that, you need to create a new line. Semicolon. Let's say or try the above statement. Debug. Start debugging. to check our code is correct. Okay, we have n backslash t n factorial and the new line. Now we need to print from 1 to 5 number of rows. So I used for loop to go through the number of line. Okay, let's say you need to print the number of rows. For example, number of rows is %d I. Just to check our code is going correct through our process and creating and such a code. As you can see, n factorial, the number of row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now we need to calculate 1 factorial, 2 factorial, 3 factorial, 4 factorial, 5 factorial. Since we have repetition calculating the factorial of n, so this block of n factorial must be inside this loop. Okay. Now to calculate 1 factorial, we need to use another loop. For example, this loop j equal 1. I will use another variable for this loop, another initialization. Now the challenge is how to determine the condition. Our condition is based on the number of row or row index. At n equal 1, you will calculate 1 factorial. At n equal 2, 2 factorial. So the n factorial is based on the ith iteration for the outer loop, which is I. Okay, j plus plus. Now to calculate factorial of I, you need to multiply each iteration together. So I will assume a variable p is the result is equal to previous p times j. Okay, we have a new variable, so you need to declare it. I declared it above. I will declare it in the first line of our code and p semicolon. Since we have a multiplication here, so you need to initialize p by 1, not 0, by 1. Okay? At each iteration, for example, I equal 1, you will calculate 1 factorial. Once you calculate 1 factorial, you will print the I backslash t, then followed by I factorial, then backslash n. I followed by I factorial, which is the variable p. Okay, let's try it. Okay, we have an error. Let's fix it before. Build, compile. Okay, debug. Start debugging. Yes. Okay. Let's say okay. I guess you need to initialize this variable inside this loop. Since at each iteration you need to reset the variable b. Okay, build rebuild solution. Something wrong on our Visual Studio. Okay, let's try it without this code. Okay, let's try another project. File, new project, C++, empty project. Add a new item, C++, add, copy, paste. And here we have another loop. This is for j less than I, j++. Okay, p equal p times j. Let's try it before printing the output. Compile. Okay, equal 1. Compile, run, yes, okay. Now, after each calculation of I factorial, you need to print the output. Printf %d the value of I, \t %d the value of I factorial, followed by \n to create a new line to go to the next or second row, comma, first %d for I, second %d for p, semicolon. Build, compile, okay. Build, clean, rebuild solution, debug, start debugging. I have a problem in my Visual Basic. So your code will be as follow. If you try to run this code, your output on the screen will print this message n \t n factorial, then we'll create a new line. Okay, at this line, at this iteration, I equal 1, the following code, it will be executed. P equal 1 for j equal 1, I less than or equal I. So this is the problem. Okay, this must be J. So the output is as follows. At 1, 1 factorial 1. At n equal 2, n factorial 2. At n equals 3, 3 factorial 6, 24, 5 factorial 120. Let's say you need to print for 20 factorial, 20 lines. What is the output? What will be the output for this code? And from 1 to 20, each I, it will be calculated its factorial, 1 factorial. If you noticed, at n equal 15 or 16, the value of factorial is wrong, will be wrong. Why? Because we declare p as integer variable. So this value should be long value. To specify a variable in order to contain a long value for any number, you need to present or declare this variable by another type, not integer. So to solve this problem, you need to declare it as double variable. Let's try it. Suppose we have double P. Okay. Be careful when you print P. P now it's not %d the identifier of it. It's LF. Okay. And now let's check it. As you can see, LF is for long float. So the result here will be a decimal point, will be with decimal point. We can eliminate this part, 0.000. We can eliminate it by simply by specify how many number of decimal number you need to display it after the point symbol. Just we said 0 point or 0.0. Okay, let's try it. The output will be as follows. 1 factorial from 1 to 20. Each I, it's calculated the relevant factorial number. Okay, we solve this problem by nested for loop. Outer for loop for number of rows and inner for loop to calculate the factorial of such a row. Okay, that's all for this tutorial about nested for loop. Thank you guys.